Hey, welcome everybody. So we are live, and my name is Raul, and I'm keeping real wrestling alive here on the Catch Wrestling Alliance channel. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I'm using a different mic today, so let me know if you can or cannot hear me. I think it should be actually pretty good today. I tested it out. I tested it out beforehand, so I'm hoping it works, and I'm hoping that this audio is much better than before. Okay, but yeah, let me know in the comments what, if you can hear me or not. Should be good. It should be good. Okay, so I want to start by honoring the passing of Dick Cardinal. So he was basically one of the old time legit catch wrestlers. He passed away. We found out that he passed away over the winter break. I think it was just before Christmas, if not Christmas Eve. Um, so I think what what we're going to talk about later kind of corresponds to what I know about him. He was actually one of the good mentors of my good buddy on the East Coast, John Strickland. So ultimately, one of the things that I'm thinking about beforehand is that like we have a lot of people who write books about catch wrestling or like catch wrestling history or wrestling history in general, but what I've noticed is a lot of them aren't like they are researchers, and I'm sure they do a good job. They do a fine job, right, doing finding information, but a lot of them aren't necessarily the actual wrestling practitioners. So if you want someone who is studying the art and does it himself and does it very well, and actually studies a lot of the history, then John Strickland, with regards to the American catch wrestling lineage and history and how to actually do it, how to apply these moves, John Strickland would be the actual expert. In my opinion, right? It's not just because he's my friend or anything like that, but it's um, because it's not just like he knows the information and he knows how to apply it. So that's usually the key to someone who's like a real expert. Besides just knowing the information, like he can actually bring it to life. And Dick Cardinal was one of his mentors, and they would spend a lot of time talking to each other on the phone. And besides that, let's give you a little bit more of an understanding of how wrestling was for Dick Cardinal. So Dick, besides doing wrestling competitions, he also participated in those AT shows, right? So what that means is that like he would take part in kind of like these all comers type matches. And so a lot of times a carnival would set that up where like maybe you'd have a crowd that they might be shy at first, so they might plant someone in the audience to like be the first person to go up and grapple with against their unbeatable person to see if they can pin them, or just take advantage of the person who's representing the carnival. So that actually happened quite often, and you'll actually have a lot of history with regards to Farmer Burns, who we'll talk about later, having those types of matches. And I believe that's one of the ways that Farmer Burns ultimately met Frank Gotch. And then after they had this kind of public match where it was set where it's like if someone could wrestle with Farmer Burns and last like 10 minutes without getting pinned, that they would win some money. So I believe that is exactly how Frank Gotch met Martin Burns, because Frank saw Martin as like this big time wrestler, and he wanted to test his skills and also meet this big time guy. And anyway, I might be rambling on about that, but I mean, basically, I believe they met in Fort Dodge, which is just a few miles south of Frank Gotch's hometown of Humboldt, Iowa. So they basically wrestlers would travel around doing these types of wrestling events, which I think is pretty much unheard of nowadays, right? Because different liability laws and all that. prevent us from doing those types of things, where anybody can just come up and have a wrestle. Right? There's a lot of a lot of potential for injuries and getting sued and all that. So that's why you don't necessarily see that nowadays, because um, the way Dick Cardinal and other people, say like Billy Wicks, who also participated in those types of shows, a lot of times they would describe, really having to go up against some really good amateur wrestlers who might not be catch wrestlers, but they might be like someone you might know nowadays, where it'd be like someone who does Division 1 collegiate wrestling, and they would then have to use a submission hold usually to get control of them. So it's like they would have to use something that was illegal for their collegiate wrestling to counter them, and get them to roll over onto their back, or whatever the rule set was for that particular match. So that's kind of how it was set up, and Dick Cardinal did a lot of those types of events. He definitely beat a lot of amateur wrestlers, people who were considered very good at that time. And he was able to pin them and really submit a lot of these people using all types of locks and stuff. But it wasn't like he wouldn't. I believe that he wouldn't have considered himself as like a man of 1,000 holds or anything like that. He thought of it the way that I want you guys to think about these, like, about wrestling and catch wrestling in particular, and submission wrestling, where it's like ultimately it is wrestling, and you find ways to get control over your opponent. And if it happens that you get the person into, or you find the opportunity to do a submission hold, great. But you shouldn't necessarily be thinking like, oh, I know all these variations of a kimura hold, or I know all these variations of a double wrist lock or whatever. It's usually you want to think of the principle, and then see if that doesn't get you into a potential submission position, right? So I believe, at least from my understanding of the stories that I heard that came from Dick Cardinal, he kind of saw it that way, and that's how he would approach matches, especially against like good amateur wrestlers. And again, he was then able to beat them using principle based stuff. He's not necessarily going in thinking of a game plan or anything like that. All right, so um, yes, so Millie Hendricks, thank you for your comment. Millie commented, a truly remarkable man. Yes, and I'm glad you commented that at that time, because what it reminded me of is the next chapter in Farmer Burns' life's work of Farmer Burns' book, where it's all about honesty. And I believe, from all I understand about Dick Cardinal, is that one of the reasons why he lived so long into his 90s is because he tried to live as honestly as possible, and he was very concerned about his health. So he was very fit for a very, very long time. He even taught seniors fitness classes and stuff like that at his local senior center. And so he was able to kind of apply this type of honest living into his life, and that ultimately gave him a strong body that lasted into his 90s. So let's go ahead and kind of talk about the lesson from Farmer Burns' book, because I think it applies. So that's why I kind of brought it up. So Farmer Burns, in the book that I keep on reading to you guys, the life work of Farmer Burns. The next chapter actually is about honesty and its effects upon man's physical condition. Right. So this chapter is kind of a transitionary chapter, where he talks about like there is a whole thing about where you'll hear honesty is the best policy. But Burns kind of says, like, quite often you'll hear that from someone who's about to try to rip you off, or he actually specifically mentions like maybe some kind of preacher will say that to you, but then they don't necessarily apply the principle in their life. And he in turn wants you to again, apply this principle into your life. And then he wants to extend that whole idea to for you as the wrestler, and in particular, he's mentioning a man, so a male, like not just we're not talking about humans in general, but he specifically mentions like, so if you're a male and you're a wrestler, and if you can apply this whole principle of honesty, like living your life in an honest way, then in turn, if you end up having a son of your own, then you can in turn uh, like help your child to be a better person overall if by you applying these types of principles in your life and in their life. Right. So let's go ahead and give you a few quotes out of this chapter. It's kind of funny because he starts talking about this oh, this is just kind of like a short chapter because I want to just let you guys know this principle, because in the next chapter I want to go more in depth into the proper ways of training children. But this chapter ends up being kind of a long one. So let me go and give you some of the highlights here, because again, I already kind of told you what he talks about at first, where he says like, oh well, like some preacher can kind of say these kinds of things, but you got to put it into practice. Right. So let's see. So this is Burns. All right. Honesty must be the basic principle of every man who expects to be strong physically or mentally. If a man is honest with himself and his fellows everywhere and upon every occasion, he is the proud possessor of a good feeling that enables him to perform great tasks and at the same time keep on a continual search for better things. He does not have to waste his time attempting to find excuses for the past. Neither does he need to have any fear that he will be confronted in any moment by his deceit and its consequences in the future. So basically, he's saying if you stop to think, you'll find that this theory is about as near to the truth as it possibly can be. Right. And then he kind of mentions where it's like, yeah, it's like, where does where does dishonesty come from? And he feels that it comes from fear. Right. So, and then he gives the example of children, because like that's what he wants to go to next, where he's talking about training children. But he mentions like quite often, it's like if a child lies to you, it's from fear. They don't necessarily want punishment, or they don't want to feel embarrassed or humiliated. And so to save themselves that humiliation or punishment, then they might lie and say they didn't do whatever you're asking them about. Like if something got broken, and if you ask like who did this, and they might just lie to you to in an attempt to save themselves that humiliation. Because of that, the root is ultimately, in his opinion, fear. So um, he's going to talk about that in a second, right? So, but the best, like ultimately, I think he feels like even though you might have that fear of humiliation or punishment or whatever, again, honesty will probably minimize a lot of say a lot of the bad things that can come as opposed to you lying about something, right? And then having to suffer consequences later, right? So parents who pride themselves upon their excellence, their excellent control over their children, frequently wonder where the child receives his first lesson in dishonesty, why he tells the lie where the truth would have served as well. And the discovery often causes the little one severe punishment and a fresh supply of fear. So it is humiliating to the child to receive a whipping, and he is but human. So that since nature demands that he actively engage in some task, whether it be mischief that seems malicious or just a plain piece of strenuous boyish enterprise that gets him into disfavor at court, he is liable to use whatever tool he can think of to keep himself out of humiliation and disgrace. Right? That is why we speak of honesty at this time. When your fellow, uh, When your little fellow commences to ask questions, try and spare him enough time to give him a satisfactory answer. Take him around with you and make a pal of him. He will appreciate it in the days to come, and you will find that your time has been well spent later in life when you need a pal that will stick through thick and thin. Right. So that's kind of his idea where it's like ultimately honesty is the best policy, and spending time with your kids to help teach them that will benefit not only them in their lives, but you as well, especially if you need them later on, if you need their emotional support later on in your life. And then he goes on and talks about one event, and he actually puts a newspaper clipping about an event that happened at the YMCA in the state next door, Nebraska, because I guess they had a meeting where they tried to encourage fathers and sons to come to so they can have a series of lectures about probably like being a better father to your kids, to your son in particular. So I'll let me go ahead and read a little bit of the the quotes from some of the presentations that were given. Right. So Mr. Wade from New York City gave a speech at the YMCA in Omaha. I believe it was Omaha, Nebraska. There was over 200 in attendance. Um, so he said, chumminess between father and son, said the speaker, is the ideal state toward which the Young Men's Christian Association, the YMCA, and the Sunday school is now working most masterfully. There are two fundamental factors that stand between the problem and its solution. First, and I think it's going to be interesting for you guys, okay? Because to think about this when this was written in the early 1900s, and we still have debates about the next line coming up to this day in the United States, at least. Okay, so the problem and its solution. The first is the unpunished crime of parenthood, or the lack of sex instruction. The second is wrong treatment of the gang tie, quote unquote gang tie. So the gang tie is one of the strongest ties known to boyhood, said Mr. Wade. And the idea is not to pull him out of the gang, but to make the whole gang what you would have your own son be. The speaker heavily scored American parents for their neglect of sex instruction, calling it the mighty privilege as well as the responsibility of the father. So let me see if there's another quote here. No, and then I'll kind of give you the like the last. So going back to what Farmer Burns is saying, he says the YMCA's every effort is for the boys' physical, mental, and moral welfare, and they have had years of experience in the handling of boys, so that this excellent organization undoubtedly has good reasons for starting such a movement, and as the above article describes. Right. So, and then the last sentence is having touched upon honesty, breeding, and its beneficial results to both physical and mental man, we will proceed, but talking about how to train young boys, right? So sex education, I think ultimately here they could be talking about ultimately how it's like the responsibility of the father to help educate the son, but I think they're probably also talking about not only like sexual activity, but maybe even like teaching responsibility as well, like in our society, in the United States society, a lot of times they talk about men having to, like the gender roles, basically, men having the responsibility of maybe trying to land a job and provide for potential family in the future. I think these are things that also are like kind of the reference in these types of statements. But all that stuff, talking about all these things with your kid is very, very important. Also, having uh, parents involved with raising a kid, also very important. So ultimately, what Farmer Burns says in the beginning about it, taking the time to talk to your kid if they have questions, taking the time to answer the questions. Ultimately, that is going to be a benefit to them and to you. So um, they, so just do it, right? So take the time, and then later he'll talk about how to train kids in general. But ultimately, I think since this is the first thing he brought up as the preface to training kids, then this is like what you want to be thinking about first. Totally having that honesty is the best policy, and applying that into your life, and not trying to, like how he mentions at the beginning, you don't want to necessarily follow the idea where, like, how he mentions like a preacher where they might say like, oh, honesty is the best policy, and then they proceed to rip you off or whatever. You want to actually try to live your life as in the best way possible. And in Farmer Burns' other writings, like if you're one of his students at that time in his distance learning class where he would mail you lessons, a lot of times he would talk about that, where he wanted you to be eating clean and also be doing outside type of workouts, and workouts that were basically like having you run or lift weights, stretching, all these types of things. And that would also be part of this type of, I would say, this type of honesty that you would have with your body, with your mind. And let me give you a personal example. So I know one of my old patients, the seniors, when I met him, he was already a senior citizen, but he told me that he had adult children already, but and they're already out of the house. They had their own families and whatnot. But what he said, with regards to what he felt was the key to his children being so successful in their life, was putting them into sports. So he didn't necessarily feel that, like, he didn't pressure them into becoming professional athletes or whatever, but and I don't think that they did become professional athletes in their sports, but he felt that sports kept them out of trouble and it helped teach them discipline and all that. But ultimately, like, if you have something to kind of work towards, so if you have some kind of ethics, I think Farmer Burns is really all about ethics, and that is what will keep you motivated to your training routine, right? Your strength and conditioning, besides just doing your regular, like, rolling, or your regular drills for wrestling, or your sparring for wrestling. It is all these this kind of ethic that kind of underlies your philosophy, or the way you want to be living your life. That's really, I think, for Farmer Burns, is what's going to keep you doing all the extra work that will make you good at wrestling. And even Burns talks about, like, all these types of workouts and stuff like that will not only sharpen your body and mind, that will then in turn become something that will make you more valuable as just a human. Whether if you decide to not become a professional athlete, if you decide to work somewhere for somebody, you'll become more valuable as an employee, or a dad, or so it's taking these ideas and applying them to your work ethic, but also your daily life. So that kind of like has like the work ethic actually becomes kind of like uh, the way you approach your life, but also kind of just becomes the way you live your life ultimately. And I think that's what Farmer Burns was kind of all about, because you see him mentioning this stuff like all the time. He's like, you got to go outside, you got to work out outside for a few hours, take a walk. If you can walk to work, even if it's a few miles, go for it, and stuff like that. You'll see him mention that, and he kind of prefers more of the country life, or at least like living where the outdoors are nice and clean, and you have a big open space, right? And where his grave is actually like a big open space. Um, the little town where he lived is very, very little, very tiny, and it's just surrounded by open fields, cornfields. It's quite amazing, corn as far as the eye can see in Iowa. So his grave is there, and I think I've shared pictures of us being there. I was there with Mike Chapman and also Curran Jacobs. We went to pay our respects to Farmer Burns. We also want to make sure that we're also paying respects to Dick Cardinal and his family and friends. And so, with that being said, I think those are the main points that I wanted to make. I want to kind of give a shout out to Dick and Dick Cardinal, and we're remembering him and honoring him. But then also want to kind of give some ideas about kind of like the whole idea of honesty in your life. I really think that Dick Cardinal really embodied a lot of those principles, and it showed with just how strong he was mentally and physically. So if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and keep on asking. Just had a couple comments this time. So thank you, Joe Biden, CCP agent. That's a pretty funny name. These broadcasts are gold. All right, thank you for saying that. I really want to try to bring you guys some ways to kind of take the information from wrestling and apply it not only with your study, your training, but like how to apply it to your daily life. So kind of like how Farmer Burns. I think that's Farmer Burns' whole point, where it's like you don't necessarily have to be a pro wrestler like me. You can better your life even at any stage of your life. So at any age, by like say in today's lesson or whatever, today's chapter about honesty, right? So if you're living your life as honestly as possible, you're not going to have to deal with problems when problems arise with regards to lying, or or trying. If you lie so much that eventually someone's going to catch you in a lie, if you live honestly, you're never going to be in that situation. So Joe Biden, CCP agent. It's the most positive act of self-love we can do. I am grateful I found this channel. Oh, that's thank you for putting that compliment at the end there. But yeah, it's really the most positive act of self-love you can do, because you're really taking away a lot of the mental stress, right? If you're so concerned about the fear and avoiding like humiliation, or avoiding hard work or punishment, then like you're gonna be lying, right? So you don't want to be lying. It's better to actually like face your problems, fix the problems, or actually live in a way that minimizes the growth of problems. Right? So I think wrestling ultimately is kind of like that microcosm of that, where it's like if you're doing the strength and conditioning, if you're drilling and you understand the techniques and you understand the wrestling principles, then you can ultimately find ways to solve your problems, whether you, in this case in catch wrestling, your problem is going to be either how are you going to pin this person or how are you going to submit this person. And so by understanding these types of principles, you can find a way to solve these problems, right? And if you're actually putting in the work, right? Because this is the thing that I run into a lot of times. So I think this can kind of be related to the whole honesty thing. Where it's like I've traveled to different cities, and I've trained in different gyms and this and that, and then you inevitably run into the person who's like, oh, I know all these different styles of whatever martial art, and I've done catch wrestling. This is the one that I this is the one that I hear more and more nowadays, I think, where someone's like, oh, I learned catch wrestling and I've trained in it for however X amount of years and whatnot. But then when they if you get a chance to roll with them, the truth comes out, right? Where it's like what kind of catch wrestling are you doing? Or it's like you got pinned real quick, you're trying to do some kind of jujitsu move, and it didn't work and all that. So there was a incident where even a couple of my beginner students just submitted this dude that was claiming that he did catch wrestling for however X amount, a bunch of years. And it's kind of like really kind of had this kind of arrogance about the way he was saying it, and but even the beginner, I wouldn't want to say it wasn't a complete beginner, someone who had done folk style for a little bit, but was more of a beginner to catch wrestling, and like no problem for this person to submit the person who's boasting about their abilities. So it's like just be humble, and if you want to, yeah, you like the old saying. I would say it's like you ain't got to lie to kick it, right? It's like you can we can all train and like get a good workout together, and you don't have to start saying about all the stuff even if you really don't know it. All right, so let's get back to your guys' comments here. Okay, so let me see where were we at here. Um, do you follow the way? Says, what kind of life lessons did the older generations of wrestling want to pass on? Why does ethics and character seem to be promoted more in Asian martial arts than in wrestling? Good question. Um, I think ultimately, say with amateur wrestling, you can still get that type of idea where the coaches will tell the parents like, oh, if you put your kid in wrestling, it does teach discipline and this and that. But um, what we find, and it's good that you mentioned the Asian martial art kind of contrast, is that uh, the I think with regards to Western countries, there is kind of that separation between that whole philosophy thing and what we have now, and you're seeing it more and more in the news where you'll have martial arts in general, so not just like wrestling, but you might even see some you see it more in MMA where you'll see some people with like not necessarily like the virtue aspect, but the whole kind of even far kind of right wing political aspect where they're kind of they're actually incentivized to be kind of inflammatory, right? To like in order to get a fight, they're gonna have to trash the other person in social media, and then it starts this whole kind of gossip where it's like like it builds up and ultimately sells a fight. So in a way, it's like in Western cultures, and I guess we kind of seen it, like how you kind of mentioned, where it's like in Western cultures, maybe it has been that way longer, and you'll still see this whole idea of like promoting the virtues and ethics that you can learn from martial arts, or you can learn from like training. You can see these or you see those things highlighted more in Asian martial arts. But again, it's like I'd want to actually go out on a limb. Actually, I'm not going out on a limb. I think there's even research behind this where it's like training in any martial arts, even if you train in Asia, it doesn't necessarily make you a better person overall, right? But it can, like the potential is there. So I think ultimately there's a lot of things that have to go into making you a better person. And I think even Farmer Burns in the chapter about fathers talking to their sons and being good friends with their sons is a part of it. But then also you got to do other kinds of research into ethics and kind of educating yourself about not just right and wrong, but understanding that there are gray areas in life and how to so if we're talking about raising a child, how to not make them feel ashamed of even if anything goes wrong, and how to be honest with each other and this and that. So um, there's a lot to it. So even if I would say even training in Asia doesn't necessarily make you a good person, but ultimately having this type of philosophy uh, has the potential to get you there. Okay, let's get to the next question. But actually, well, before we get to the next question, so I think that's why you'll see marketing for One Championship, that the Asian MMA promotion, where they try to promote the athletes more than the trash talk. And I think they even had one incident where it's like their CEO said that Conor McGregor wouldn't be welcome in One Championship. They would never hire him if he was like a free agent and wanted to fight there. Ultimately, they actually are bigger than UFC with regards to like viewership. More people see their events than UFC. Also because they make it available for more people, and also you have like really intense high populations in some of these Asian countries, and they have access to watch these events. But ultimately, yeah, more people watch that, and they try to build up the character, or like help you to understand more about each fighter. So that's also a contrast between maybe something with regards to Asian stuff, right? So in this case, an Asian MMA promotion and a Western MMA promotion. All right, next question. All right, so Joe Biden CCP agent. So you're in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thanks for listening. I've I've been to Cleveland a couple times, so maybe I can go to Cincinnati one day. Okay, next question. Character is a big part of wrestling, but it's not well known outside the room. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, so I kind of mentioned it right now with one championship where they try to, with as a company, they try to let people know through their social media more about the athletes, right? And so you don't necessarily see the athletes arguing with each other on social media to try to build up a fight. Um, but you will see that in Western promotions. So I think that's one of the differences. I believe that it should be the company. Like, say if we have a promotion, any MMA promotion, or I even try to do it on our social media for the Catch Wrestling Alliance. I really try to share highlights from uh, each of the participants in our events, right? So hopefully more people know. I think more people are knowing these names because some of you guys are commenting and saying you're asking about certain people in particular. Um, so I'm trying to do that, and I think we'll try to do that even more as time goes on. But yeah, you can actually learn a lot about the different fighters on one championship's social media. I think even better than say like if you look at UFC social media, they'll have a lot of great pictures there, or even some kind of highlight moves. But in one championship, they'll actually have kind of stories about the people themselves. Not all of them. I think there's probably still some favorites, right, that they'll share even like more often. But you'll at least get some kind of understanding of who these people are. All right, Blanche Ramirez. So yeah, so Blanche Ramirez is actually. I'm assuming this is my mom or my sister. I'm assuming it's my mom. So the truth will always set you free. That's very true. So you stress out less if you're honest, right? Do you follow the way? True. I think selling fights tainted boxing and MMA culture. Yeah. Ultimately, I believe that you can have say a profitable organization, whether it be boxing or MMA, without all the trash talk and all that. But again, it goes to the education aspect, where if the promotion can educate the audience as to why they should care about the fighters, right? Because I think nowadays, I mean, there are a lot of MMA promotions, and like you just don't know unless say like I know the person personally, um, or I don't know, I found out about them, or there's someone's talking about them, then I wouldn't necessarily know based off of the advertisements, right? So one championship, actually, I know more of who those fighters are because of their social media and their attempts to educate people about them. So that's why I keep bringing that up. And actually, I look to them as kind of a model of how a promotion should do social media. So, you really have to show that these people are individuals and they have their own interesting stories, their own interesting life stories, and um, they like they are good athletes, and that should be kind of like put above their ability to trash talk, right? Right. Because I don't necessarily believe that was like a huge thing, even when in the heyday of catch wrestling, right? You have a lot of, yeah, and that's why it became, say, with regards to wrestling, that's why Dan Gable lost his only match, right, to Gary Owings, right? So, um, he used kind of like the psychological warfare on Gable, and Gable was used to having everything kind of be straightforward and with regards to press conferences and this and that. And then, oh, sorry, not Gary, Larry. All right, so then Larry in the press conference, he said, "Oh, I'm going to beat him," and whatever. He didn't. I wouldn't necessarily consider that trash talk so much. He didn't go as far as like people nowadays, um, but it was so out of the ordinary that that allowed him to get into Dan Gable's head and ultimately got him the win. Right? It was basically was it Dan's only loss there, and then he went on to just like dominate everyone for years after that. All right. Okay. So next question, Joe Biden, CCP agent. In your opinion, is spirituality an aspect of character development which can aid a fighter athlete? If yes, what techniques have you used? For example, visualization, prayer, rituals, etc. Um, I think it's possible. Ultimately, the how or what I learned over the years, besides doing so, like I did a lot of Chinese kickboxing or sanda, and through like my interest in Chinese like kung fu styles, I ended up learning like several forms of Tai Chi and also what it's called Qigong. But I think that can be more precisely understood as a meditation style. Tai Chi also, but it takes a lot longer to learn. But Qigong is very, very simple. You just have different positions that you kind of stand and breathe in. So I think that is way more effective at getting you into that like the meditation mindset where you kind of get out of fight or flight and you can just like relax your mind. And then I think that is the qigong is the easiest way to get you into that state, into that flow state. So I think with regards to competing and this and that, I think that those types of things. So like qigong actually involves like the visualization. For some reason, I'm not able to say that word today, but you know what I mean. Where it's like you can kind of envision like your breath kind of controlling the circulation of energy in your body, and that can help you to calm down because if you're only thinking about these types of little tasks, then it gets the rest of your psychological pressure like off of you like pretty quickly. So that's why I'd recommend that over Tai Chi, because Tai Chi, then you have to first learn a whole form. So you have to learn a whole sequence of movements. And then once you know that so well that you don't have to think about it, you can just do it. Then that's when you can really get into that whole meditation mindset, that whole flow state type thing. So that's what I've used. Yeah, prayer also is good. It's one way of meditation. I think I consider all of these types of things meditation. Prayer wouldn't necessarily be moving meditation, because if you just stay still, wherever you're at, that's where you're at, right? So qigong and I think even like yoga and this and that, those are considered moving meditation styles. So yeah. I really love yoga as well. I think that also ended up protecting my joints a lot, because of the types of movements you do in yoga. So there's a lot of benefits to these types of moving meditation as well. All right, next question. Uh, do you follow the way? Like the Reem documentary was awesome to tell Alistair Overeem's story. I wish more of that would be done. I'd love a documentary on Sakuraba. Yeah. I think a documentary on Sakuraba would be good as well because so people can understand better his origins. Because besides his great achievements in MMA and beating all the Gracies who were at their prime, he beat them in their prime. So that was a big accomplishment. All right, and then also so people could know that he did have some training time with Roy Wood as well. I think that'd be good to get out there. Okay, so Joe Biden, CCP agent. So integrating the mindset of Qigong or Om as an act of self-control and self-awareness. Um, yes. So like the whole Qigong, Tai Chi, um, um, yoga type stuff. can help self-control, self-awareness, kind of get you the meditative mindset. But again, like I said earlier, like martial arts or even these types of meditation things doesn't necessarily make you a good person, because like what you see is like you'll see, like, say with regards to yoga, there's some really famous yoga practitioners who ended up like even getting arrested, or like basically trying to take advantage of a lot of their followers or their affiliates for like there's like one big time yoga guy that ended up opening all these yoga branches all over the world. I think he got like arrested or something. So you can find incidents like that. So I think all these things help, but just as long as you have and there's a lot of work you have to do. So as long as you have like that work ethic, where you're training body, mind, and learning about maybe different perspectives. I think that's kind of a way you can do that, where it's like you learn different philosophies, different um, perspectives from different parts of the world, or different philosophers. Then that might help you get a better sense of how to be a better person, or at least someone who's doing less harm to the world, and you can still be such a high level athlete, right? Because we've seen that many times, where it's like people who take on like a vegan diet, crushing like land speed records. So that their philosophy is like trying to do the least amount of harm and still show that you can be a high level athlete. So yeah, it's interesting we got into this tangent, but I think it's still it's within the framework of what we're talking about ultimately. And I believe, with regards to Dick Cardinal, I believe he pretty much tried to live cleanly and work out and eat as healthfully as he knew how. So I think that's all part of it. Like, so it can keep you competing at a high level. It can help with the longevity, so you can be competing at a high level for much much longer. And another thing to consider, where it's like in sports nowadays, you might hear people say like, oh, the veteran fighter, you hear it a lot actually in sumo wrestling. If you guys watch pro sumo, um, you'll talk about like, oh, the veteran fighter, he's like 32. I don't know how long he'll stay or whatever, but it's like, but then you'll actually have pro sumo wrestlers that are actually 40 years old and still winning matches. And um, so Frank Gotch, in his book, he didn't consider a wrestler to be mature. So with regards to that whole body mind aspect of knowing how to stay calm and knowing what move to use at the right time and stuff, until they reached age 40. Um, so the whole age that comes up in particular, that age, because quite often in Western society that's considered like over the hill or whatever. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. A lot of times it's how you think about something will reflect in the way your body reacts, right? So your brain, again, is ultimately the conductor, or you can think of your brain as the general and your body as the troops or the orchestra that follows the orders of the leader ultimately. So you got to be um, thinking about the whole honesty thing. Another lesson that we did a few videos ago was ultimately like Farmer Burns mentioned, the power of optimism in your life and in your health outcomes and stuff like that. So having these types of uh, beliefs and ideals will help not only you perform better, but it'll help your body. You can think like age better, right? So you can still be at a high performance level longer. Let's get to the next question here. Um, Let me see. Okay, yeah. So we discussed the whole integrating the mindset of qigong and yoga and stuff like that. So whatever, and ultimately, I think it's like whatever you like. And some people like Pilates. I've never taken a Pilates class or whatever, but I like a lot of the Chinese martial arts stuff, and I like yoga. So I'll continue doing all those. But if you find something you like that's not harming yourself or other people, then I say go for it. I like yoga in particular because I believe a lot of those movements really, I don't, it's not I don't believe I know that a lot of those movements, not only are they kind of get you on the ground on the mat, doing a lot of wrestling positions, but you have to hold these positions a lot, so that I ultimately results in stronger joints overall. So like stronger elbow joints, stronger shoulders, wrists, and stuff. So then that um, can make you a more resilient wrestler as well, and it can help minimize injuries, as well as also like strength training. So like doing all the weights and stuff like that. Um, all right. Okay. So I think I might have spoken enough, and I think hopefully I got my point across. And I think this was thank you for chatting with me, everybody. Yeah, like there's a lot that we discussed. Oh, D England, outdoor workouts are the best. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And with the since I'm in LA, we have more of a stricter quarantine for the coronavirus. So that's actually shut down a lot of gyms. So it's actually pushed a lot of workouts to be done outside. So I'm enjoying all of that. Because I used to, where I grew up was in the desert, so I used to go jogging outside anyway, and I believe that became kind of like a meditation for me, where it's like you're just jogging in the middle of tumbleweeds and whatnot, sand dunes and all that. So it's just you and your thoughts and your breathing, and that ultimately becomes a way of meditating. And so I feel kind of like thankful for that aspect that I can run outside now and kind of get back to that whole kind of meditative aspect while you're jogging. Um, all right, okay, so respect to you, Joe Biden, CCP agent. And so hopefully we'll see you guys next week. And also, this is available. This will be available tomorrow in podcast form, up on our. You can see the link down below on our podcast platform. We're on Anchor, so that should be available on Spotify and Google and iTunes and all that tomorrow. Also, you can consider joining this channel. We're actually going to put up a couple videos with regards to Dick Cardinal and the move everyone seems to be referring to when they talk about him, the West Point ride. So that's going to be our video that we're going to post on Monday. But we're going to we filmed a variation of that West Point ride. We'll go ahead and put that for members only. So you can consider joining our channel, or even joining, if you want to become a member of the CWA Academy, feel free to do that too. And there's also a membership tier here that you can join both, right? So if you join that one, it's called Super Student Tier. Then just let me know, and then I'll have to take your email and then enroll you into both. But you'll get access to all our lessons and all the behind the scenes videos for the members of this channel. All right. All right. Okay. Yes. So, yep. CCP agent. Thanks. Stay strong, my friends. Yep. Everyone stay strong and keep real wrestling alive. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.